Hello and welcome to Just Ride Bikes. I'm David and this on review today is a brand new Cannondale Scapel, the US company's latest XC race bike, designed to be razor fast and cut through a pack whether you're at the World Cup or an amateur XC race. Now, Scalpel has been around for over 20 years now, but this is the most progressive in terms of geometry numbers and also suspension travel, as we see XC World Cup courses become ever more technical and more challenging and much more fun to watch. And the bike manufacturers are responding with bikes that are definitely a long way removed from how they were 10 or 20 years ago, and trying to combine that efficiency for climbing and speed and low weight you want from such a bike, but also a bike that's much more capable when going downhill and rock steps and sharp corners and all that sort of stuff you might get. And also for longer distance marathon riding, like the Cape Epic, for example. And also those of us, like myself, who love riding a bike like this, not for racing, but for riding their local trails at the weekend in a cross-country style, which is where mountain biking for me started way back in the 90s. So I've been riding a bike for the last 4 to 5 weeks, and today in this video I'll share my experience of the bike. But first, let me give you a tour of the bike and point out some cool details like the Lefty suspension fork. So let's start at the front with the Lefty Occo suspension fork, 120mm of travel, same at the rear as well. And the Lefty fork, despite being around for 20 years, still looks as distinctive as ever, and is still very much a head turner and a conversation starter. But it does work extremely well. Loads of stiffness when you're smashing into braking bumps. It doesn't deform or flex at all, and the damping on this new fork is very good. How it compares to a RockShox or a Fox is probably better done in a more in-depth comparison for some side-by-side testing, but it does work extremely well and gives the benefit of changing an inner tube or fixing a puncture on the front very quick, because we don't have to remove the front wheel. So that's pretty cool. And it's carbon fibre, of course, to keep the weight down, and a little guard on the stanchion down there, air valve down the bottom, and adjustment on top as well. So that's a really cool feature, very distinctive. They use it on the lower level models in the price range as well. Talking about price, the range starts from just under £4,000 and goes right up to £10,000 for the Lab 71. This is £8,500, so lots of money, but all top end kits, race ready. Definitely a bike if you are feeling well heeled, want to really treat yourself, a bike to go for. But yeah, definitely expensive. There are more reasonably priced bikes lower down the range and a regular handlebar stem, because we have a one-piece carbon fibre handlebar stem. Looks really cool, very radical looks. It's a 760mm width, quite a nice shape actually. Luckily the shape does work for me, and the width is okay for XC riding, with Garmin mount on the front there. And we have, controversial perhaps, we have one hose and 2 cables going inside the front of the handlebar, and then down through the headset and into the frame. So it does keep the front end reasonably clean. But yeah, internal routing, it's popular on road bikes, it's coming to mountain bikes now. On a top end race ready bike, it's probably okay. But like I said, lower down the range, you get a regular 2-piece handlebar and stem with less internal routing. It still goes via the headset, but not via the handlebar. So yeah, interesting move, very interesting indeed. Then a full carbon fibre frame, of course. Swing arm is carbon fibre, looks very nice. I like the fact we have space for 2 water bottles, and it's a single pivot layout with no rear pivots here to save weight, and very flat carbon kind of leaf spring flex stay designs there. Something Cannondale have done for over 20 years as well. Remember testing a Scalpel in 2012 and it had this sort of flattened carbon stay. So any concerns around durability, hopefully shouldn't be an issue. And then we have a RockShox Sid Lux shock on this bike, with a small linkage there driving the shock and controlling the leverage ratio and so on. And the rear shock and the fork are controlled by a RockShox twist lock, open or locked. So pretty simple, it works okay, very popular on race bikes these days, have a twist lock, but just 2 settings, open or lock. So pretty simple really. And then this is the dropper post for the Fox Transfer SL. So a 2 position, up or down, which we'll talk about again later. On the bike we have 2.4 inch wide Maxxis Aspen tyres and a Recon Race up front. Definitely a very fast rolling, more dry condition trail. And the group set on the bike, the frame is UDH compatible, so we have the latest SRAM EXO transmission rear derailleur, which looks really cool, still looks distinctive. And taking a few bashes okay. I love the crankset, really super lightweight, big hole there, very thin around there, well safe weight. And we have a very racy 34 tooth chainring on there, and the 1052 on the back, of course. And a set of DT Swiss carbon wheels to keep the weight down. And if I spin around the other side, we now have a threaded 68mm bottom bracket. Way, what a change! Never thought I'd see that. And the top tube on the bike is very wide, very broad. You can see it down there, and very flat as well, very distinctive. All about maximising stiffness and keeping the weight nice and low. The other big news on this bike is the geometry, so slacker and longer than ever before. A 66.6 degree head angle, which is very slack for an XC race bike. There used to be 69, 70 or more back in the day, but now they're where trail enduro bikes were a handful of years ago. Longer reach as well. This is a size large, fits my 181 centimeter height very well indeed, and a nice 75.5 degree seat angle as well to keep your kind of position on the bike very efficient in terms of getting power out via the cranks. And 120mm of travel front and rear as well, so similar to Scott Spark in that regard. So that's a quick tour around the bike. Let's hit the trail and we'll talk about how it rides, starting with climbing performance, because if a bike like this can't climb well, then it's basically failing as its main objective of being a rapid XC race bike. Well, as you would expect, it does climb very well indeed, thanks to the low weight and the very efficient suspension and a nice steep seat angle. It gets up climbs extremely well. The only thing really holding me back on the climbs is the chainring size of 34. It's a bit big for my current levels of fitness, but definitely aimed at World Cup racers who are supremely fit and way fitter and stronger than me. That's my limitation, not the bike's limitations.
I ran the rear shock with about 25% sag for my weight with riding gear and found it's a nice balance and setup with a lefty suspension fork in the recommended pressures. It's a reasonably firm suspension with 100% anti-squat in higher gears at the sag point, ensuring the bike remains stable when you're pedaling hard on the climbs. But bigger impact finds the suspension willing to move and gives a very compliant feel as the anti-squat tails off and it sucks up bigger holes and roots with impressive ease.
But the suspension is so efficient, it works so well. I've mostly been riding fully open mode, and despite not having 3 settings like on the Scott Spark or a Giant Anthem, it copes with everything really well. It doesn't bob about, it's not losing me energy, but it gives plenty of traction on the rougher climbs. Been very, very impressed.
The fit of the bike is reasonably aggressive as you would expect, quite low at the front but not the lowest in the class. And I found no discomfort despite the firm saddle on longer all-day rides. So a good contender for a marathon race bike, especially with space with 2 water bottles and a decent length dropper seat post. Despite the slacker head angle on the new Scalpel, it doesn't feel any less sharp when zigzagging through the trees and around corners. And when the trail does open up and the speed increases, it possesses a very stable ride and lets you really pump and flow through rolling single track. And keeping the front wheel in contact with the ground on very steep climbs proved no real issue thanks to a low front end and a steep seat angle. The bigger challenge is keeping traction with low profile Maxxis tyres.
And when it comes to descending, boy is a bike a lot of fun, which is not something you often say about XC race bikes. They're very good at going uphill, very fast indeed, but not usually much fun on more technical rougher downhill sections. But this bike, my goodness me, it's so good. It's way better than the Canyon Lux World Cup, the Giant Anthem, and probably up there with the Scott Spark. Not quite as good as a Transition Spur, so it's not quite down country, short travel trail bike, still very much an XC race bike, but one of the most capable bikes I've yet tried, yet tested, for really letting you enjoy the descents as much as the climbs. If you enjoy climbing, which I do, to be honest, I do enjoy climbing, I do enjoy pushing my body, and the bike definitely enables you to really push those limits going uphill, but also get maximum return on your investment and maximum bang for buck when descending down the other side. And I'd be surprised just how good the bike is and how it can cope with rougher courses where a trail bike and enduro bike will be better. Yeah, not getting down super quick, but I'm getting down without being as scared as I would be on a bike like the Canyon Lux World Cup, which was a pretty dicey bike when it came to descending, at least with me on it, Mr. Average.
Cannondale's decision to slacken the head angle and stretch the reach has paid off well when you're putting the bike down any hill. Combined with the supple suspension, and it feels like a mini trail bike at times, scampering through the corners and over rocks and through drops with impressive desire. It's a playful bike too on a twisty trail, which is not something you usually associate with XC race bikes. They're designed for one purpose, going fast uphill, and don't really go downhill very well at all. The move from 100 to 120 mil of travel is a smart move, with no real downside in climbing efficiency, but giving you more headroom to really stretch your bike on rough trails and downhill tracks. And while it's still not a lot of travel, you never really feel like it comes up short even against bigger drops and impacts. It's also a very forgiving bike when you are racing or riding flat out, heart rate firmly in the danger zone, and I made fewer mistakes and lost less time on a descent when trying to keep up with faster buddies. You never win a race on a downhill, but you can definitely lose it. So this improved descending ability is much appreciated, especially for us non-racers. So I have genuinely been blown away with just how capable this bike is for a short travel bike designed to win World Cups. On some longer all-day rides, tackling lots of climbs and long descents, the Scalpel proved to be a surprisingly comfortable bike that was a lot of fun to ride fast downhill. Not a compliment that can be aimed at many XC race bikes, but it is a pricey bike compared to key rivals. A Canyon Lux World Cup, for example, with a lighter SRAM XX is £600 cheaper, but it's a bigger difference in the overall ride performance in my opinion. The Scalpel is a more well-rounded package, especially if you like descending, in my opinion.
Okay, likes and dislikes, and we'll start with the bad stuff first. Well, not necessarily bad, just not amazing. So the one-piece handlebar and stem, if you are racing, you're a pro, that's fine. And I actually quite like the width and the shape, it works for me, and the Garmin stem is kind of neat. But I would choose a lower level model with a regular two-piece handlebar and stem, so you're more easy to change the stem length and handlebar width and sweep and shape, and not have this internal routing, which is a divisive topic for sure. So that is a bit of a negative perhaps. And then the lefty suspension fork, it works extremely well, but it's still as divisive as ever before. It's still a head turner. You still get comments and jokes from kids saying, "Oi mate, where's the rest of your fork?" So yeah, you still have to live with that. But another negative is the chainring size. Designed for racing, so we have a big 34, which I found quite often a bit too much. So a 32 or a 30 is something I would personally see on there. I think the lower level models, the mid-range bikes, would probably have a smaller chainring. I'll check that later and drop a comment on the screen now. So very much evidence it's designed for racing, for those supreme athletes, but for me it's just too much, even with the 1052 on the back. And the other negative is the Fox Transfer SL. It's a two-position dropper, either up or down, which I don't like. I'd rather have that option to go somewhere in between, because quite often you're traversing single track downhill and you want it sort of halfway up, not fully slammed. I guess for racing you're either full mast or fully dropped, I guess. And then the suspension lockout, I'm not really sure about having fully open and locked out for racing, versus having a in-between trail mode and allow the open to be even more open. But I do like the simplicity of a 2-position and having that open suspension work really well all the time. So that leads me on to pros. I think the suspension is fantastic. In full open mode for just trail riding, it works really well all the time. Never feels too soft or wallowy, never felt the need to reach for a lockout, just works well all the time. Efficient, doesn't bob around when you're climbing, loads of traction, and good on the downhill stuff too. I like the fact we have space for 2 water bottles, and you leave your hydration pack at home. This transmission group set works extremely well. It looks cool as hell too. Fast shifting, reliable shifting, nice fast rolling, big volume tyres as well. Although as we're heading into autumn, winter now, I would expect a slightly chunkier tyre set for a bit more grip, because these are better when it's dry and dusty, which is definitely not right now. And the other big pro is, of course, as I mentioned already, the amazing handling. That geometry, the extra suspension travel, it does deliver big smiles, big rewards when you are riding technical trails, much more than other bikes I've ridden in this category. So a bike that, yeah, it's a bike that I can live with very easily indeed. It's a bike that's fast, rapid uphill, and then so much fun going down the other side. So yeah, be a lot of fun riding this bike. But then the other downside is the price. This bike is £8,500, which is a lot of money, but the mid-range bikes costing about £4,000 look pretty good to me, and that would be an interesting bike to test to see whether it loses any of the magic this bike clearly has, thanks partly to all the carbon fibre and the low weight of the bike. So time for my verdict. Should you buy the new Cannondale Scapel, or avoid it, or buy one of the rivals from other brands? Well, it's definitely, in my experience, one of the best XC race bikes I've yet tested. One that's fast, lightweight, stiff, and very efficient, and climbs extremely well. But it's also one of the best descending XC race bikes I've yet tested. And that's great if you're racing on a very tough, demanding technical course, or you are an average guy like me and you need a bit of a skills compensator in the bike, the geometry and the suspension to help you get down technical trails a bit faster. So definitely a bike I can recommend if you are racing, you want a bike that can deliver that performance and efficiency for racing, but also a bike that's extremely impressive away from the race circuit as well. And that for me is where the bike really, really shines compared to bikes that are great when you're racing, but pretty rubbish, pretty pants away from the race circuit. So a very impressive bike, and a bike I'd happily have in my stable long term indeed. Anyway, that's my verdict on this Cannondale Scalpel. I'll put a link to the company's website down below. You're going to find out more about this model and other models in the range. And do let me know what you think of the bike. Is it on your short list? Is it a contender for your money this year? Love to hear from you as always. And if you want to see a review of the Canyon Lux World Cup for comparison, that video is right up there. And of course, if you want more reviews like this on a regular basis, then make sure you hit that subscribe button right there. But I'm off for one more spin before the bike goes back. So I'll see you again very soon. Thank you so much for watching.